Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of Meezan lecture series. So, as you would all recall, we have been studying Ustaz Ghamidi's book Meezan, also labeled as Islam, a Comprehensive Introduction. And we have been studying various chapters of this book. And today we'll begin a new chapter, which is called the Penal Shariah of Islam, or the Sharia in which various Islamic punishments they are categorized and classified regarding various crimes. So, in order to understand the whole objective of this new topic, we have to understand that the opportunity human beings have been given to exercise their will. This, of course, is one of the greatest favors that the Almighty has blessed them with. But the thing which is important is that just as this freedom to choose one's choice and conduct oneself according to one's own ways, just as it is something of a boon for human beings, it also creates a lot of problems for them, because the misuse of authority, the misuse of this freedom can result in a lot of disorder. And precisely because of this reason, the angels at the time of human beings' creation, when Adam was being created, they had remarked to the Almighty, "Ataj'alu fiha man yufsidu fiha wa yasfiku ad-dima." So, O Lord, would you create someone who would set up in this world, who will spread disorder in the earth, and he caused bloodshed? So it was precisely because of this reason that this question was asked by the angels, that why are you creating someone who is going to create this trouble and disorder on the face of the earth? And in the history of mankind, the very first manifestation of this evil actually took place through the hands of Cain, the son of Adam. And out of this incident arose the need to protect human beings from the evil of other human beings. And all regulations concerning crime and punishment have been prescribed, therefore, to fulfill this need. So, in other words, the real purpose in them is to root out evil and disorder, and this is precisely what it should be. So, in the case of those who accept God's guidance and profess faith in the messengers of God, it is more different, and that of, in this case, we have to understand that basically the Quran has said that if they perpetrate a major crime against the life, wealth, honor, and the state system, then it is the verdict of God that they be afflicted with torment in this very world, so that they become an example for others. So, in other words, if you look at some of these punishments, which are, as we shall see during this course, you'll find them to be pretty strict and pretty harsh. So, one of the reasons is that once a person enters into the covenant with the Almighty of obeying His Sharia, then disobeying it in any way is a grave crime, and that is why very strict and grave punishments are prescribed, which of course also become deterrents for other people to perpetrate this crime. Also important to note is that the way these crimes are mentioned, the way these punishments are also mentioned, they actually present the extreme forms of reproof, which means that they must be administered only when the circumstances of the crime are such that the criminal deserves no lenience. And if any lenience is deserved by him or her, then of course these extreme forms will not be given, and lesser forms of these crimes will be administered. The other important thing that we have also to realize is that as far as these crimes are concerned and their punishment is concerned, the way they are addressed to the Muslim society, it is evident from that very address that they are addressing the collectivity, which is actually represented by those in authority. So, in other words, these punishments have to be administered by those in authority, by the state, and no group, no person has the liberty or permission to inflict these punishments on his or on her own. So, this is basically a state law, and punishments cannot be administered except by state authorities. So, these two important things that have to be kept in mind before we start off this chapter or this topic are very important. So, firstly, we have to understand that if these punishments are very harsh, if they are very strict, then the reason, of course, is that they are basically given to Muslims. They are not meant for non-Muslims. They are to be given to Muslims who have entered into a covenant with the Almighty. And when they break His covenant, then they will deserve punishment. So, just as they will be punished in the hereafter for this misdemeanor, the same will happen in this world. And at the same time, we have to realize that this becomes a deterrent for other people to perpetrate such crimes. And the second important thing is that all these punishments have to be administered by state authorities, and no one single person has been given this right to do so. Now, as far as these crimes are concerned, you can see that they are basically related to 5 major crimes. And as far as all other forms of crimes are concerned, their legislation has been left to the discretion of the state, with this stipulation that the death punishment can only be given to people who either commit murder or are guilty of spreading anarchy in the land. We shall discuss that later on. But what is important here is to understand that these are the 5 areas, just these 5 areas in which punishments are given and subscribed, in other words, by the Sharia. So, as you can see, the first of them is muharaba. Muharaba means waging war against God and His Prophet. So, muharaba, or waging war against Prophet and the Almighty, of course. We will see that how actually this amounts to such an extent. The second is related to murder or injury. The third relates to theft. The fourth to fornication. And the fifth to qazf, which actually means accusing someone of fornication. So these are the 5 crimes. All other crimes, we have to understand that they are left to the discretion of a parliament, and they can legislate with this stipulation that as far as the death punishment is concerned, that can only be meted out to people who are either guilty of murder or who are guilty of spreading disorder in the land. Also important here, dear viewers, is to realize that as far as the punishment of apostasy, the punishment of polytheism, and the punishment of disbelief, as far as the punishments of these 3 crimes are concerned, they are solely related to God's domain. No human being, no state has been given the authority to punish people for these 3 crimes. So for polytheism, for disbelief, and for apostasy, these 3 crimes will be punished by God. In the past, He did punish people for these crimes in the times of His messengers, and He shall do so in the hereafter as well. But as far as other courts are concerned, and in the post-prophetic era, of course, these punishments cannot be administered in any way, as I said, because they relate to God. And when God did punish people for these crimes of course, being polytheism, disbelief, and apostasy, it was through His messengers. And He did so, and therefore this must not be in any way cause any misconception that these 3 crimes also stand as part of the penal law of Islam. So now we shall take up these 5 punishments one by one and discuss how the Sharia has ordained these punishments, how it has given us the details of this punishment. So let us first start off with the fact that as far as the capital punishment is concerned, I just mentioned to you that the only stipulation for the capital punishment is murder or spreading disorder in the land. So the Almighty has said in the Quran, "Man qatala nafsan bighayri nafsin aw fasadin fil ard faka'annama qatala an-nasa jami'a." He who killed a human being without the latter being guilty of killing another or of spreading anarchy in the land should be looked upon as if he had killed all mankind. So this is something that has to be understood at the very outset, that punishments which relate to other crimes besides these 5 crimes, they can be legislated by a parliament of an Islamic state, but as far as the punishments are concerned, they cannot extend to murder or to capital punishment, except if the person is guilty of murder or spreading anarchy in the land. Now, as I said, let us take up all these punishments one by one. The first thing that has to be understood is that as far as the state is concerned, remember these punishments, they are meant for Muslims only. So as far as non-Muslims are concerned, for them, the crimes that they will commit, and as a result, the basic punishment that will be given, that shall be based actually on the precept of the agreement made with non-Muslim citizens. But these punishments that we are now going to discuss, they explicitly relate to Muslim citizens. So Let us now start off with the first of these, and this is called muharaba, and I'll try to explain this. But I am going to first read out this punishment, the text of this punishment from the Quran. This is found in the 5th surah, which is Surah Maida. These are verses 33 and 34. So the Quran says, إِنَّمَا جَزَاءُ الَّذِينَ يُحَارِبُونَ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَيَسْعَوْنَ فِي الْأَرْضِ فَسَادًا أَن يُقَتَّلُوا أَوْ يُصَلَّبُوا أَوْ تُقَطَّعَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَأَرْجُلُهُم مِّنْ خِلَافٍ أَوْ يُنْفَوْا مِنَ الْأَرْضِ ذَلِكَ لَهُمْ خِزْيٌ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَلَهُمْ فِي الْآخِرَةِ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ تَابُوا مِنْ قَبْلِ أَن تَقْدِرُوا عَلَيْهِمْ فَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. The punishments of those who wage war against God and His Prophet and strive to spread anarchy in the land are to execute them in an exemplary way, or to crucify them, or to amputate their hands and feet from opposite sides, or to banish them from the land. Such is their disgrace in this world, and in the hereafter theirs will be an awful doom, except those who repent before you, overpower them. Then you should know that Allah is oft forgiving, ever merciful. So as you can see that the punishments which are mentioned in this verse, they are four, and the first of them is to crucify them, which means to execute them. Before that is even stated, it is said that to execute a criminal in an exemplary way, which is أن يقتلوا. The second is أن يصلبوا, which means to crucify him, and the third is to amputate his hands and feet from the opposite sides, and the fourth is ينفوا من الأرض, which is to exile a person from that place. So now first let us understand the meaning of muharaba. Muharaba literally means that if in a state ruled by the messenger of God, people challenge the authority of any of his directives or decisions, then this is waging war against God and His Prophet. This is what is called muharaba. Similarly, spreading anarchy and disorder in the land refers to the situation when an individual or a group of individuals rebels against the law and attacks the life, wealth, honor, and freedom of expression of people. So, when murder becomes terrorism, fornication becomes rape, and theft assumes the form of robbery, or people take to prostitution, become notorious for their ill ways and vulgarity, are a threat to honorable people because of their immoral and dissolute practices, or rise against the government in rebellion, or create a law and order situation for the government by indulging in such heinous crimes as hijacking, vandalism, and intimidation, and by committing something very similar, then this is what we call spreading anarchy in the land. So as you can see, the verse says, إِنَّمَا جَزَاءُ الَّذِينَ يُحَارِبُونَ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَيَسْعَوْنَ فِي الْأَرْضِ فَسَادًا. So as far as يَسْعَوْنَ فِي الْأَرْضِ فَسَادًا means that they are striving to spread disorder in the land. So we just saw that robbery and rape and hijacking and abducting people for ransom, all these, and prostitution, of course, all these forms of crimes, they relate to spreading disorder in the land, and they are tantamount to muharaba. So about such type of crimes, we have to understand that the Almighty has subscribed 4 punishments. It has subscribed 4 punishments, and you can see that right in front of you, that these are, the first of them is taqtil, the second is tasleeb, the third is amputating limbs from their opposite sides, and the fourth is nafi, or exile. So as far as taqtil is concerned, the first of them, so the words which the Quran uses are an yuqattalu. So this is what the verb the Quran has used. Now these words actually, if a person is a connoisseur of the Arabic language, they imply that not only should the criminal of this category or criminals of this category be executed, but the execution should be carried out in a manner that serves as a severe warning to others. The reason is that here the word taqtil has been used instead of qatl. So this is a very subtle difference, but it is a very pronounced one. Remember, it has not been said that you kill such people who are guilty of spreading disorder in the land. On the contrary, what is said is qattalu, which means kill them in an exemplary way. So taqtil is actually the word which means that the killing process should have some severity in it, not just plainly killing someone, but to killing that person in a very, very severe and a harsh way. So it is a requisite of this directive that such criminals be executed in such a manner that others are able to learn a lesson from this. And if you reflect, you will find that the punishment of stoning, which is rajam, is one form of taqtil. And the Prophet actually in his own times, in accordance with this directive, administered this punishment to certain criminals guilty of fornication and rape. So remember, this is basically what the Quran has said. So the Quran has not specified rajam or stoning per se, but it has actually said that people who are guilty of such heinous crimes, then one of the options to punish them is to kill them in a very, very severe way. And stoning to death is one of those severe ways. So in other words, rajam is a form of taqtil. It is a form of severely and harshly killing someone. And we know that the Prophet did punish people through this way, especially those who were guilty of rape. The second crime, of course, or the second punishment which is mentioned in this verse is tasleeb. Now, tasleeb means crucifixion. And just as the verb that was mentioned for the previous crime was qattalu, remember? So on the very same weight, the word is sallabu, which is has the same significance in the Arabic language. So basically, this is from the taf'il category. So it implies that criminals should be crucified in an exemplary manner. The cross on which this crucifixion takes place is an erective structure upon which a criminal is nailed through his hands and feet, and he is abandoned there until death. And again, you can see that this again is a very, very harsh form of punishment. And it is very exemplary. But the word tasleeb means that other means which make it still more exemplary can also be adopted. So basically, the Quran has given us a principle that that people who are guilty of these crimes, depending on the nature of their crimes, an Islamic government, a court of law, has these four choices. The first of them is taqtil, to kill them in an exemplary way. The second is tasleeb, which means to crucify them in a very harsh and an exemplary way. And the third is an tuqatta aydihim wa arjuluhum min khilaf, which means amputating limbs from opposite sides. Now, this is also evident that this form of punishment also serves as a very severe warning to others. The purpose of this punishment is that if the criminal is allowed to live, then he should serve as a reminder and as an example before the society, and also remain incapacitated to commit future evil. Now let us come to the fourth punishment which is mentioned. The fourth punishment is a relatively easier one, and it is called nafi, or exile. To exile a person from his homeland or from his place of residence. So it is obvious that this punishment of exile is the least in intensity in this category of punishments. Of course, taqtil, tasleeb, and amputating limbs from the opposite side, they are very, very severe forms of punishment. But this fourth one is something which is very, very relatively easier than the first of these three punishments. So in this fourth punishment, without harming the body of a person, it only deprives that person from his house or his own country. The Quran, in fact, also requires that in general circumstances, this punishment should be carried out in its true form, that a person should be banished from the land that he is living. But there could be some situations in which this is not possible in the modern era. So the directive shall stand fulfilled in the eyes of Ustaz Ghamidi if the criminal is confined in a particular area, or if he is kept under house arrest. So that would also suffice. But since each of the punishments mentioned in the verse is separated from the particle aw, which means that you can give either of these punishments, it is evident that the Quran has given an Islamic government the flexible authority to administer any of these punishments, keeping in view the nature and extent of the crime and the circumstances of the criminal in which he has committed this crime. Also important are the consequences which this crime can produce. So depending upon the nature of the crime, the consequences that it can produce, the Islamic government has a choice to administer any of these four punishments. The relatively lighter punishment of nafi or exile is placed with the two very severe punishments of taqtil and tasleeb, so that if circumstances are such that the criminal deserves any leniency, he should be given this leniency. And therefore, in accordance with this verse, the Prophet, while taking into consideration the circumstances and the nature of crime in his own times, granted remission to certain criminals guilty of debauchery by exiling them. Similarly, while obeying this directive, he stoned to death certain others who did not deserve any leniency. And if you look at the prophetic practice in more detail, you'll find that the Prophet's inquiry regarding the marital status of criminals guilty of fornication and profligacy was also based on the pretext of whether the criminal deserved any leniency or not. Now, unfortunately, what has happened is that our jurists have erroneously inferred from the Prophet's inquiry that the marital status of a person was actually the basis of the punishment, and on this basis maintain that the directive of administering 100 stripes or 100 lashes is the punishment of fornication as mentioned in Surah Nur. This was abrogated for married people who indulge in adultery. So by not understanding this question which was posed by the Prophet, if he asked for the marital status, it was not because he was making this a base, but it was actually asked in order to determine the circumstances of the criminal. If he had access to his wife, why did he go and to someone else? So actually the Prophet, while deciding the fate of such criminals, he had asked many questions to see whether they deserved any mitigation or leniency. The question of an offender's marital status was one such question. But our jurists unfortunately concluded that it was the only question asked and hence made it the basis of the punishment. They thereby incorporated in the Penal Code of Islam a totally baseless addition which is against the Quran as well as the norms of sense and reason. So what has to be understood here is that the Quran has given a very wide range of these punishments at the discretion of those in authority, and looking at the various circumstances that a criminal may commit his crime, these are the various options which a person or a representative of the state has. So about certain habitual criminals of fornication, the Prophet is reported to have said, and I'm going to just read out this hadith before you. This is from Al-Jami Sahih of Imam Muslim. It says, acquire it from me, acquire it from me, acquire it from me. This is like stressing something by repeating it thrice. The Almighty has revealed a way for these women. In such crimes, unmarried men and women should be punished alike, and their punishment is 100 lashes and 1 year's exile. Similarly, married men and women would be punished alike, and their punishment is 100 lashes and death by stoning. So in other words, what he was saying was that if they deserved any leniency, then their punishment would be exile, of course 1 year's exile and a punishment of 100 lashes. But if they did not deserve any leniency, then it was 100 lashes and death, of course, by stoning. And remember also, it is according to the morality of law that once death punishment is subscribed, any other punishment, although mentioned in the charge sheet, it is not administered. So a person who is to be given the death punishment will, of course, not be lashed with 100 lashes or stripes. This is something which is already understood. So as far as the Prophet is concerned, this is how he explained it. And in the hadith, the reference, the hadith, if I can be displayed once again, you can see the words are قَدْ جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَهُنَّ سَبِيلًا. Now this basically is an expression which is part of the Quran, and it refers to the directive that was given as a temporary one in Surah Nisa, and this is now being displayed before you. It says, وَاللَّاتِي يَأْتِينَ الْفَاحِشَةَ مِن نِسَائِكُمْ فَاسْتَشْهِدُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ أَرْبَعَ مِنْكُمْ فَإِنْ شَهِدُوا فَأَمْسِكُوهُنَّ فِي الْبُيُوتِ حَتَّى يَتَوَفَّاهُنَّ الْمَوْتُ أَوْ يَجْعَلَ اللَّهُ لَهُنَّ سَبِيلًا. And upon those of your women who commit fornication, call in as witnesses 4 people among yourselves to testify over them. So Ustaz has written a short footnote on this, and I'm also going to read it out. He says that those who can bear witness that these women are in fact prostitutes who habitually commit fornication. So it's not that they need to see those women committing this act, but they are sufficiently knowledgeable to testify that these women are in fact prostitutes. So The Quran says that upon those of your women who commit fornication, call in as witnesses 4 people among yourselves to testify over them. If they testify, confine them to their homes until death overtakes them, or God formulates another way for them. So this is how the Quran has said that as far as these women who are habitual in their fornication. So the style and construction of the verse "Wallati yatin al-fahisha" actually refers to women who just don't commit fornication plainly, but they are habitual in this regard, and they in this way actually refer to prostitutes. And therefore it's not that ordinary women who are guilty of fornication are being referred to here in this verse of Surah Nisa, but women who are prostitutes are being referred to. So, and precisely because in this case the main offender is the woman, because she is a prostitute, men are not even mentioned in this verse. They are not even mentioned. And the Prophet, while deciding the fate of such criminals, said that since they were not merely guilty of fornication, but also were guilty of spreading disorder in the society, as they had adopted prostitution as a way of life, those among them who deserved any mitigation, any leniency, should be administered the punishments of 100 lashes, according to the verse of Surah Nur that we just studied, because of committing fornication, and exiled according to the verse of Surah Maida that we studied. So in other words, those who deserved any mitigation, remember, these women who are prostitutes, if they deserved any mitigation, then they would be struck with the 100 lashes and exiled. But those who did not deserve any leniency, the Quran says that they should be stoned to death according to the directive of taqtil of the same verse of Surah Maida. So the words unmarried and married of the hadith, they are actually meant to explain this principle. 100 lashes is mentioned, just explained with rajam or stoning to death, merely to be included in the charge sheet of the law. So a hadith, they also verify that the Prophet mentioned this punishment of 100 lashes with rajam, but never actually administered them. And the reason which I just said earlier on is that adding any other punishment to the punishment of death is against legal ethics. The punishment of whipping, in jailing the offender, and exacting a fine from him are given for 2 purposes: to make him a means of severe warning for the society, and to severely admonish him for his future life. In the case of the death sentence, obviously, there is no need for further admonition. So if a person is going to leave this world, what else can be done with him except but to put him to death? So if a criminal is to be punished for various crimes, and the death penalty is one of those punishments, all the punishments are stated in the judgment as a charge sheet, but in practice only the death sentence is carried out. Another important thing that we have to realize when we study these punishments of muharaba is, remember, if you just once again display the verse of muharaba, it says, "Innama jazaa'ul lazina yuharibuna Allah wa rasulahu wa yas'auna fil ardi fasada." So the words that are used are plural. Yas'auna means they strive, and yuharibuna means they wage war. So they are actually pointing out that if a gang of criminals has committed the crime, the punishment shall not be given to only some of the criminals, but to the whole gang. So if a gang of criminals is guilty of spreading disorder in the land, and it commits such crimes, such heinous crimes as murder, hijacking, fornication, sabotage, and intimidation, there is no need to investigate exactly who among the gang actually committed the crime. Every member of the gang shall be held responsible, clearly, because the words, as I said, are yus'auna and yuharibuna, which means that they are used in the plural. An important thing is that the Quran says, "Zalika lahum khizyun fid dunya," that such is their disgrace in this world, that are used in this verse indicate that while inflicting punishment upon such criminals, no feelings of sympathy should arise. The Almighty who created them has ordained complete disgrace and humiliation for them if they commit such crimes. This is the very purpose of this punishment and should always be taken in account. And remember, the Quran says that their humiliation in this world will be a means of severe warning for others, and for those who do not respect the law on the mere grounds that laws deserve respect and as such are useful in maintaining discipline and law and order in the society. So Islam does not encourage these absurd philosophies in which we give any mitigation to such punishments, to such criminals. And one important thing that has also to be understood here is the very last verse, or the very last part of this verse, which says, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ تَابُوا مِن قَبْلِ أَن تَقْدِرُوا عَلَيْهِمْ فَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ, which means, except those who repent before you overpower them. Except those who repent before you overpower them, which means that the verse imposes this condition that if such criminals come forward and give up themselves to the law, they surrender to the law, then the government, before the government lays hand on them, then they shall be dealt as common criminals. They will be not regarded as criminals of muharaba or spreading disorder in the land. They will be treated as normal criminals. So this is something that has to be understood, that criminals who repent and mend their ways before any action is taken by the government, they shall not be dealt with in according to their former status, and they shall be dealt with according to the ordinary law about such crimes. If they have usurped the rights of common citizens, compensation shall be provided to these citizens. Now, also important is to realize that if the stress is considered of this verse, فَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. So فَعْلَمُوا means, and you should know. If this stress and emphasis is understood, it becomes clear that no measure of retaliation by the government is permitted if the criminals repent and reform themselves before the government captures them. And as you can see, the verse says, فَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. The Almighty is merciful and forgiving. So if He forgives the person who repents before he comes in the grip of the law, why should His servants adopt a different attitude? It should also remain clear that those who confess merely to escape punishment, they are an entirely different case. So they are not being implied here, remember. So when a person or a criminal knows that he is going to be nabbed, and at that time he just comes forward and gives up, that is an entirely different case. So in their case, the government indeed has the authority to refuse any mitigation. It can not give them any concession if it wants to. So viewers, this is the first important punishment that we have covered today. Inshallah, we'll cover the remaining punishments in the coming sessions. But just to sum up what we have studied today, that as far as the punishment of muharaba is concerned, spreading disorder and anarchy in the land is concerned, the Quran has given court of law 4 options, and the first of these four are very, very harsh and very severe, and they have to be given keeping in view the circumstances of the crime and the extent of the crime committed. And at the same time, the 4th punishment, which is that of exile, can be given to people who deserve any lenience, of course. And at the same time, we also need to realize that all these punishments, they relate to the court of law, they relate to a state. No individual has the authority to punish people in any way on his own or her own. And also important to realize is that these punishments, because they are basically meant for those who enter into a covenant with the Almighty, they are meant for people who are believers, who are Muslims. And the reason that they are harsh is precisely this, that because they have entered in a covenant and an agreement with the Almighty, they must realize that if they break it, then it's not just a punishment they are going to suffer, it's a very grave torment also that they are going to suffer. And also we have discussed this fact that these punishments, they are extreme forms of reproof, and they are to be given only when a criminal does not deserve any leniency. As you can see from this list of muharaba also, that the various options are given are also depicting this very principle. And finally also we must understand that as far as the criminal law of Islam is concerned, people have erroneously added some more punishments. For example, the punishment of disbelief, the punishment of polytheism, the punishment of apostasy in the penal code of Islam. Whereas these 3 crimes, they are solely the domain of God. The Almighty punished such criminals in the times of His messengers. He is going to do that again in the hereafter. But in the post-prophetic era, these crimes will not be punished in any way. So these are punishments that will only be exacted by God. So as far as the human domain is concerned, let's just end our talk today by just once again describing before you the fact that these are the 5 crimes for which the Sharia has prescribed punishments, and we have covered the first of them, and that is muharaba. The remaining 4, the first of them is murder or injury, the second is theft, the 4th is fornication, and the 5th is qazf. These are the ones that we will be taking up in order later on, but these are the only punishments, and all other crimes, they can be punished by a legislation, but as I said, this cannot be the capital punishment in any way. No legislation can be made in favor of the capital punishment except if the person is guilty of murder himself or herself or spreading anarchy in the land. So now we can move to the Q&A session, and if you have these questions, please raise them.
If anybody has any questions, please, this is the time to ask. Thank you, Dr. Saleem. In the meantime, while we're waiting for people, I'll ask you a question. Why is it so strict, Dr. Saleem, especially if somebody is saying that they don't believe in Allah anymore? Is Allah not supposed to take this up with them after, in the hereafter?
So you see, I've just explained this. We've just explained it, that these punishments are solely meant for Muslims and for believers. If people who commit these crimes, they are non-Muslims or they don't profess faith, then for them different punishments will be prescribed. So these are specifically meant for Muslims only, because they have entered into a covenant with the Almighty. So it's not just a mere settling of affairs by professing through the tongue that we have entered into the faith of Islam. It's a very important and pertinent agreement that we have made with the covenant of God. So these 5 punishments, they are specifically meant for the believers and Muslims, and they are basically, they are meant to humiliate and disgrace a person who commits such crimes. And at the same time, as I said, that they are extreme forms of reproof, as we shall see in the rest of the 4 punishments that we will cover in our later sessions, that they cannot be given, in a situation in which people deserve any mitigation or concession, or maybe, for example, in the case of theft, if a person steals out of compulsion, if he's hungry, or maybe, as we also know that in the times of Caliph Umar, he did not give the amputation of hands punishment in his own time, because there was severe drought in his times, and people did not even have enough food for their own consumption. So if they ended up stealing food, this punishment was not given to them. So this is one example of how circumstances have their own impact on the extent of the punishment. Only when a person deserves no lenience should these punishments be given. And remember, only to the Muslims.
Thank you so much. Nogair 20, you can unmute your mic and ask your question.
Dr. Assalamualaikum, is Abid from UK. Dr. My question is, where the things gone wrong? When we talk about Islamic culture or Islamic society, we always emphasize on these 3 punishment or 5 punishment. Oh, okay, the Islamic State is like that. We have to impute the hand and do the rajam and everything. Why we are concentrating only on the punishment? Why we are not thinking about the other things? Where the things have gone wrong?
So remember that as far as this series is concerned, we are covering various topics of the Islamic Sharia. This is just one topic. And when we are discussing a topic, of course, we'll confine ourselves to that topic. But as far as other important areas are concerned, they are part of this whole series, because we are going to cover all of them. So this is just one small part of the complete series. Also important here to realize is that the basic, in my understanding, the basic flaw that has occurred amongst Muslims, or the flawed approach that we have, is this ritualistic approach in which we think that basically a Muslim is a person who observes all these worship rituals, and as far as his character is concerned, his conduct is concerned, his dealings are concerned, they are never discussed in a way that they may be taught to people that they first need to be good human beings who should have good dealings with other people. They should be upright in their behavior. Their character must conform to the highest standards. Instead of also discussing these things, because our general approach in discussing and teaching Islam is to just teach people certain rituals and at the same time not make them understand what these rituals stand for. Because remember, we know from the Quran that these rituals are not an end in themselves. They are a means to an end. In other words, if we are praying or fasting or doing Hajj or Umrah, giving charity, this is meant to make us better individuals. So they are not an end in themselves. But because they are taught in a way that we think that they are an end in themselves, that we don't use them to purify ourselves, to make ourselves better individuals. So if we use these rituals in order to become better individuals, we will have a very holistic approach of religion in which rituals will have their place, character and conduct and dealings will also have their place. But unfortunately, because of the fact that we are ritual centric more, and this is the general way in which religion is taught to our younger generation, that they end up being ritual centric, and all that they can think of when a Muslim person is to be a religious person. They think that, well, if he's praying 5 times a day and he's doing his charity and Hajj and all those rituals, then he's a Muslim, he's a good Muslim. Whereas, as I said, this is a very, very incomplete, in fact, a flawed concept of Islam.
Okay, Dr. Bhatti, please ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. So I have two questions. One is a simple one. There is nafi, punishment of nafi these days could be like imprisonment. But the purpose was to, I think, to take these people out of the society, and that's what imprisonment does. So is it the same thing as
I think that this would not be correct, because you see, you're not house arresting a criminal, you're not confining a criminal to his own family. Remember, nafi actually means that you transfer that criminal with his surroundings to a different place, so that he is not part of the society anymore, and that not being part of society is like a punishment. But in the case of a jail punishment, this is a very, very different thing, and we will discuss that in a later session as well, because there was no concept of any jail punishment in the times of the Prophet. People, I mean, as you can see, I've just enumerated before you the 5 punishments, and you'll not find the jail punishment configuring anywhere, because you see, the jail punishment in itself is in my understanding, a very inhuman punishment. You are confining a person in a cell, in a dungeon, in which you are determining for him what he has to do. For example, a person could be penitent after a couple of days, but you have decided, well, unless you spend 3 years or 5 years behind the bars, even if you have mended your ways, even if you have repented, even if you think that there's a lot of remorse and you'd like to be a person who would be a changed person, but you have set a target or set a stipulated period that unless 5 years pass, you shall not come out, for example. Second important thing is that this jail punishment is not just a punishment for the criminal, it's a punishment for the family as well. So what is the crime which the family committed if by depriving themselves of the presence of that person? I mean, they had no hand in that crime.
When they took them out, they put them in different, I heard, kala pani mein bhej diya.
So this is not. I mean, you see, this is not, these black waters. They were not prescribed by Islam in any way. These were basically punishments which were prescribed by the Mughals of the Indo-Pak subcontinent. If you look at the criminal procedures which have been laid down in the times of the Prophet, you will not find jail configuring anyway. Yes, I mean, temporary, when a person is under investigation, when the whole crime is being investigated, yes, that is a temporary position in which he might be held. He might be held, but that is not, you'll never find in the times of the Prophet any punishment being given which relates to confining a person behind bars. That is a much, much later invention, I would say, or a proposition. It was not part of the Islamic Penal Code in any way, neither in the Quran nor in the Hadith.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem.
Can I ask a second question? I wait for
We'll be moving to the next, Bhatti Saab will be moving to the next person.
Dr. Can I ask a second question?
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Thank you very much for the explanation. But I wanted to ask, the first question I have is the application of the punishment that we have for some of the non-Muslims who have burnt the Quran. Why would it be applicable to them when they're not even Muslims? So, the Islamic law is not really applicable to them. The second thing, which is, my apologies, is the translation of the ayah where you mentioned that the women that have committed the fornication, the Ghamidi has that explanation underneath where it says, i.e. those who bear witness that these women are in fact prostitutes. The ayah, does it say that these people are, like, these women are committing this act like repetitively, or they're in the profession?
Right.
Thank you.
Yes, that is precisely what he has said. You see, the words used are wallati ya'tin al-fahisha. Women who are continuously guilty of fornication, who are continuously doing this as a habit. And remember, if it was an ordinary case of fornication, men would have also been mentioned. So you find men not being mentioned precisely for this reason, that these women are under consideration who had adopted prostitution as a profession. So there are two things which indicate that prostitutes are being referred to here. One, the expression allati yatin al-fahisha, which means who continuously commit fornication. Of course, this could be for habitual women as well who are not prostitutes. But the other thing which then stamps the final authority on the fact that these are prostitutes which are being implied is the fact that men are not mentioned. Otherwise, had it been a case of simple fornication or habitual fornication, of course, men would also have been mentioned in equal footings, and that is not. So that is why he has concluded that prostitutes are being mentioned here.
See, and the Mubara is used, the present tense is used, so that's why.
Of course, that's another way, because of the fact that the way in the Arabic language, allati yatin al-fahisha, the way it is mentioned, that this expression, the way it is constructed in the present tense, it refers to a present continuous tense, which means that they are continuously guilty of doing this. And could you refer, what was the first question?
The burning of the Quran by the non-Muslims.
So as far as burning the Quran is concerned, there is no punishment subscribed by the Sharia for any such act. So you can legislate such a punishment, but at the same time we have to also understand that these acts, when they are done outside the territory of a Muslim state, they are done, for example, in a non-Muslim state, we have no say in them. All that we can do is, of course, we can tell people that this is not the right way. But I think, in my understanding, the best way is to ignore all such happenings. If they are trying to burn the Quran, the Quran is an established book. We don't need to beg for its status to be restored by asking people that they should punish such people. Of course, respecting all books of God, laws can separately be enacted in a different country, that all books should be respected. But other than that, for example, in the absence of any such law, if there is an act of sacrilege in which any book of God is burnt, I think the state should try to stop this from happening. But for example, if it does not stop, I think for us the best way is to just ignore these happenings. Because as I said, by burning the Quran, all that the person is doing, he is just venting his anger or his venom or his fury. But as far as Muslims are concerned, I think instead of getting angry or furious, they should try to analyze it. Why is that person burning the Quran? Is it something that maybe they have misunderstood the message of the Quran, the terrorism and the phobia that they have developed for Muslims, because of the fact that they think that people who are guilty of doing these crimes, they derive their inspiration and ruling from the Quran itself. So basically, when non-Muslims, they burn the Quran, they express their disgust that how can people be murdered by those who draw inspiration from this book. So I also recall, I think this is about 150 years ago, in the late 19th century. So William Gladstone, I remember, we read about him in history that he was the Prime Minister of Britain, and he had a singular distinction of being the Prime Minister for 4 times. And he is reported to have said once in the British Parliament that as long as this book exists in this world, there shall be no peace, implying the fact that the Quran basically incites people to violation and to vandalism and to destruction. So I think that all these acts of destruction and vandalism, of course, they should be checked by law of the country in whatever way it's appropriate. But at the same time, we should also realize that we have made a mess of a lot of directives of the Quran by not making people understand that Islam does not stand for violence. It does not stand for terrorism. It does not stand for taking the life of people through suicide bombings. It is the view of a very small minority which has now overshadowed the silent majority. So I think instead of getting angry, they should put in more effort in trying to discover the message of the Quran and in a very sympathetic way conveying it to those people who are furious.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bhatti Saab, please ask your follow-up question and please make it short.
Sir, earlier you mentioned that these punishments can be only for Muslims or for people who have believe in Allah and Allah's book and all that. So if a country, a Muslim country, a non-Muslim commits fornication, so he cannot have the same punishment as Muslim.
I mean, we can give that non-Muslim the freedom that their punishment will be decided according to their law. Every non-Muslim has a religious law. So if you look at the Jews or for example, other denominations, you'll find that they have their own laws in this regard. So a Muslim country has a choice to give them freedom in this regard, or they can negotiate a punishment with them. But these punishments which we have just studied, they are solely meant for Muslims. Yes, non-Muslims could agree that, well, we are also comfortable with these punishments, then that's their choice.
Yeah, Doctor, I got one question. In Surah Waqia, there is a mention about Sabiqun, Sabiqun, Ulaika al-Muqarrabun. Can you just tell us that in this present world, is there possibility of Muqarrabun?
Yes, of course. Why not? People who take the lead, people who are the Sabiqun or the Muqarrabun, the Quran says, Sullatu min al-awwaleen wa Kalilu min al-akhirin, which means that these Muqarrabun shall be of a very large number in the earlier generations. But in the later generations, they will be still there, but they will be in a smaller number. So the Quran itself has predicted that in the first generation of the Muslims, near the time of the Prophet, the number of the Muqarrabun and the Sabiqun would be very large. But in the later generations, they'll still be there, but in a smaller number.
Okay,
Yes, go
so
ahead.
this is my question. I was just saying that typically, if you look at the Al-Mawrid institution or yourself, the approach to things is quite logical and methodology based, and always you talk about self-analysis when you incur problems and things like that. But my question is this: that at times in life you can end up in situations which are of extreme pressure and overwhelming. So if we look at the cultural practice or the Pakistani society practice, it talks a lot about certain forms of zikr and so on to help you through that. I just want to understand what your take on that is, because a human being can get into a position where things can get overwhelming, and at times it can be a bit paralyzed to do there's only a certain limit that you can do self-analysis, right? At some point you have to surrender to God and say what happens.
Right.
Just looking for a guidance of how do you advise dealing in those situations of extreme pressure?
Right. So actually, it depends on the nature of the pressure and the circumstance that you might be going through. But you see, in general, when you are passing through these testing times, always do remember that life is another name for test that we are all going through. And basically, it is this test that has its own philosophy. For example, at times it is meant to bring the best out of us. I have discussed this many times that when a person is passing through a testing period, he or she becomes in these crisis time, draws upon those extra reserves of abilities and potential that we have, and these latent potentials, which are basically below the benchmark on most occasions, they are below the surface level. They are never called upon. But in times of crisis, you draw upon your reserves, and they come to the surface, and they add to your ability. They make you more resilient. They make you more strong. So you have to also think that at times the Almighty is testing you. One of the reasons would be to make you strong, to make you a person who has more resilience, more steadfastness for future trials. Then, of course, there is also this philosophy that at times these trials, they are meant to bring you closer to God. When a person is passing through good times, he or she might not think of God in a very focused way. But when we are passing through testing times, on most occasions, we tend to remember God much more. So again, these testing times, they prove to be a boon for all of us. And then thirdly, also, the philosophy could be understood in another way, that at times the Almighty wants us to do some soul searching. We might be doing something wrong and not realizing that we are doing something wrong. So at times, these testing situations, they come, they put a stop to a certain routine in our life. We withdraw from the normal routine. We tend to think more. As I said, it becomes a time for soul searching. It gives us the opportunity to analyze whether maybe something is going unnoticed, but we are doing something in a wrong way. Similarly, at times the Almighty would like to, as I said, also bring us to account, to punish us for some of the wrongdoings that we are persistently doing. And in spite of realizing our persistent wrongdoing, we are not taking any steps to overcome them. So these are, the best way to go through these situations is to always think that every situation that we pass through, it has its own background in philosophy. I have just referred to 3 or 4 instances in which these testing situations, they have a role to play in our life, and always that role is a positive one. So if we can shape up our lives in a way that we take every test as a challenge, every testing time as a challenge, stare the challenge in the eye, never give up, be a person who always looks at the positive side of things, and makes his way or her way in spite of the extreme adversity he or she might be facing, then this is of course something that God would like to check also. He is not just going to reward us merely by letting us pass through these good times. He wants to test our mettle also. So if we are able to concentrate on the philosophy of these trials, I think it becomes a little easier for us to grapple with them.
Dr. Saab, the question is, you people have done, the Al-Mawrid have done a lot of things. Al-Bayan is there, the Tadabbur Quran is there. Now, if we, as a common person, we still need to think about more about the Quran, or it's been finished? Because the Quran is saying make tadabbur, do the thinking and use the intellect. So I think the blueprint is already given. So what do you think? What's our responsibility to think about? Because see, you have done everything. I've seen the. So I think you understand my question. Why our responsibility now?
As I said, our responsibility, first of all, I always stress this, is that if you have to become a good Muslim, then the first step is to become a good human being. And to become a good human being, the only way towards that, in my understanding or my suggestion, is that we be self-critical of our own selves. So instead of thinking of what other people are not doing, we must concentrate on what we are not doing. So God is going to hold us answerable for what we are, wrongly doing. So being self-critical, being turning more to our own self, the telescope from which we view other people's mistake, we must turn it inwards to our own selves. We must pick our own faults. We must be not judging other people, but judging our own self. So in short, concentrating on the flaws that we have, and at the same time thanking God for His blessings and for the opportunities that He has given us, that is the right way to move forward in life. And in that way, we would be able to benefit from the Quran as well and from our own intellect. But because we are concentrating more on what other people are not doing, we don't have sufficient time to concentrate on what we are not doing. So that is where I think we need to revisit our attitude.